My name is Josh, and welcome to Hide and Seek Archives, a podcast where we talk about things supernatural, cryptid, or unexplained. And we are live. Welcome, everybody. Today we have Adam Davies, a very special guest, to come talk to us about the Michigan expedition. How are you doing, Adam?
I'm very good. I'm hot in San Diego, of course, but I managed to put some pants on. I remember, Josh, before we went live, so I won't embarrass you tonight. Don't worry, brother.
Just don't stand up.
No, we're good. We're good. I remembered. Like 15 minutes before, I thought I better put some clothes on. So that was good.
And then, of course, I've got my co-host, who is my father, Todd Parsons, to join us today.
Yep, glad to be here and really looking forward to this.
But so Adam, tell us a little bit, quick snippet of your background and.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, I have done expeditions all over the world since I was very young. I've always had a fascination with mysteries and exploration. So I've covered a broad range of subjects that interest me. And so some examples would be looking for the Makili Mbembe, the Congo dinosaur, and obviously the jungles of the Congo, the Orang-Pendek in Sumatra. I've looked for lake monsters, the Seljord Serpent in Norway. But most particularly, I'm interested in answers to questions about Bigfoot, Yeti, and other hominids. So I've been for the Yeren in China, the Mandi Barung in India, all over the place. You name it, I've done it. Mostly on my own time and my own money. I've been largely self-financed for those things. If I'm making a TV show, I won't be. And that's great because I don't have to pay for it. And it's fun. But a lot of it's been, and that's been advantageous because I've not had a lot of money, so I've had to learn to live like the locals. I've tracked with the pygmies, for example, and I've had some of the best experience with tribal peoples. So that, in synopsis, is my background.
Okay. So.
No, go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
And I was going to say that's some fascinating stuff. I'm sure I'm looking forward to our conversation about Michigan, but I could probably spend hours and hours asking you questions. But anyway, go ahead, Josh.
For those who don't know, we did go on a big expedition after the Michigan Bigfoot Conference to the UP, and Adam actually went out with us along with Robert Kreider and Gwendolyn and the rest of the lost cryptids, and so did my father and his wife. Had a good handful of people out there, and we ended up splitting off. And Adam, I know you said you went off and y'all did y'all's thing, and some other people went off and did some other things. So tell us a little bit about what happened.
Well, let me tell you about the conference first of all, because I think it's important we start with that, because that was a good starting point. Yeah. And it was your first ever conference, I understand, yes, as a group. Now, I don't do many of these conferences. It's not because I'm precious about it. It's simply because I work, and I also prioritize, when I've got my free time, exploration. I'm an explorer. That's what I like to do. So I don't do a lot of them, but I chose to do yours because it was new, it was different, and also you gave me the opportunity to explore the Upper Peninsula. So that was good. So I like that. So if I do one of these conferences, I like to spend some time afterwards exploring, if I possibly can, because that's what I'm interested in. The conference itself, I really enjoyed. I thought it had a good vibe to it, good ambience, and the people there were great. It was a really friendly atmosphere. I enjoyed it all the time I was there. Genuinely, I can say that. So you did a good job. It's always hard in your first year to do these things, and I see some comments where people often say, "Well, You know, people are doing it for the money. And it's like, one thing you're not doing it for when you organize a conference is for the money. Let me tell you, anybody else out there, because it's not a way to earn money. I mean, you might be able to eventually when you've done a few of them, but, you know, what these things are, essentially, or an opportunity for people who are interested in the subject to meet up, have a chat with them. There's a social, convivial atmosphere, and people have fun together, and that is a good thing. That's a good thing. So you're creating a good atmosphere, and it's friendly, and there's never any, to the best of my knowledge, the ones I've been to, there's never been any notion of avarice. It's always been about, well, let's do this, it's going to be fun, and I think that's a great attitude. So that's the first thing I would say before we go there. So do you want me to move on to the expedition / investigation now, guys? Is that what you'd like me to do?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So we were going up. Now, there's a couple of things to say to set the scene, and then we'll have to set the scene again. But I essentially want to go into this now, and it's actually going to be fun for me telling you. So when we get to that thing, but I want to build up to it because I'm very linear in the way I approach things. So I want to move into it slowly, simply because it happened at the end. So before we'd even gone, David had said, David Dominique, who's obviously a key member of your group, and you work very well as a team together. You're very nice with one another. I like that.
Yes.
You are very nice. And he had said, well, you know, you're going to be staying at this cabin thing. There's a whole bunch of other people staying there. And there's lots of potential Bigfoot activity, but the cabin is like potentially haunted. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing the story, but I just think it's quite funny. So if I've got elements of it slightly wrong, do forgive me, because I haven't spoken to him about it since. And at the time, I wasn't really absorbed in it. I was thinking more about the Bigfoot stuff. So he said, well, you know, there's been sightings of a child or something, a 9-year-old girl or something in the grounds behind the cabin. And he said it's owned by, let's just say, an ex-military person. He was more specific, but I'm not going to give any more details out than that. And he said one night he was, and he's high up in the military, and he was going to the bathroom, and he said he saw what seemed like a figure, some sort of apparition, white or something like that, stood at the foot of the stairs before you go up to the loft area, the sort of attic area where you sleep. And I said, well, what did he say to it? And he said, well, he told it to get out of the way because he wanted to go to the bathroom. And I thought that was brilliant. That was a typical military response. So I told Gwendolyn this, and she brought, I'm not a ghost investigator. I'm not interested in it. I really am, but it's not my area of expertise. I'm an explorer and that sort of thing. So I don't know anything about that sort of thing. It's important for me to state. I do have I'm interested in it, but I've not got any experience. So she brought her stuff. She says, oh, we'll bring the stuff. And the first night we were there, because we got there late, we sort of pootled about with it a bit. And we got, she did this thing called the Gansfield experiment, where you basically put on these headphones. I'm giving you an abbreviated version. And I got a load of static in, and I just say what words come into the sound. It's like a radio wave. And I couldn't hear what question she was asking. We did it by this tree. We picked up a couple of potential orbs. Could they be insects? Yes. But it was interesting. And I picked up, and I said something about a 9-year-old girl or something there. And it was interesting. We had a good time. And we sort of left it there for them, because we were interested in all the Bigfoot stuff, you know. But we did it the first night and said, oh, we'll come back to it, because we couldn't do it that night. We'd got there at night. We had to set up and do all of that. And it was dark. It was a fun thing to do. In terms of the Bigfoot activity, I think there were, 3 or 4 significant things. The first thing is when I went out tracking with her the next day, came across what looked like a potential print. And now I'm always in the attitude that if you see something that might be a potential print, if you don't cast, you don't get. You don't know until you've done that. And I've cast prints before, particularly in jungle areas, where I've thought, well, maybe the definition isn't that great, and they've come out really well, and vice versa. So we cast that, and you could see from the indentations that it did look like the outline of a print. And there was also one over a slight incline on the other side, and again the heel area was about 11 inches. This was about half a mile from camp. And there were no people around, so I would very much doubt somebody would be walking barefoot around there for no particular reason in the middle of the woods. So it was interesting, and you could see fresh deer tracks as well, and you can speculate that it was tracking the deer. And when we brought the others over, we brought Robert and you, Josh, you came over, and Blake and James, all the other guys. You could see that there was Robert found what he felt might be knuckle indentations on the other side near some pylons, and you could see a possible trail where it had walked through and looked for deer. So that was encouraging. We set up some trail cameras. Ernie and I set up some trail cameras in the area. I set a couple up, and so did he. I don't know whether he got anything on those. I'll have to ask him if he's got anything. But the prints themselves didn't come out with any definition. But I think it's definitely worth doing that. And I think that was very encouraging. I think that was very, very encouraging to do something like that as an experiment. And, during that time I walked for miles early in the morning, scouring the area. And it was a fascinating habitat. That ecosystem is very rich for people who don't know the area. There's bears, wolves, all sorts of things. There's a lot of predators in a concentration of area of tracks I found, which suggests very reasonably that there's obviously a lot of prey for them to eat. There's a lot of wolf tracks, there's a lot of bear tracks, more than anywhere else I've seen as a concentration. And there's a huge amount of deer tracks. So it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to work out what the primary food source is around there, but it's an encouraging ecosystem, is one thing I'd say. And, for me, when I'm planning on doing research and expeditions, one of the things that I like to consider is whether the ecosystem will support the existence of such large creatures. And I didn't see anything to deter me from the fact that, yeah, it very much does. So that was interesting, but it wasn't persuasive. And I'll talk about the standard of evidence when I come on to the final thing that I want to say. So that's that. And, the other teams, primarily in synopsis, focused on the other area. I'm not going to give the location now or make any reference to it because you guys want to keep it secret, and I understand that. So let's just call it the other area for now. Now, I did not go to that area. I went with Ernie, Michelle, and Gwen to an area where Ernie thought might be a good place to pick up other additional evidence. And I don't, obviously I want to be in the epicenter of activity, but also, when you've got a team, I think it's important that you spread out your resources and you don't think, what, I'm just going to go here because this is the best place for glory or best place. You have to diversify your resources. Otherwise, you're not working as a team, you're working as an eye. And I thought that was important. So we went to this other area and it was deathly quiet. There was a light I saw once flickering in a tree, which can't really explain, I'd seen a similar thing in Washington. So I'll have to speak to my friend Will about that. I haven't got around to that yet. But other than that, it was very, very quiet. Now, it's my understanding that, and I want to caveat evidence in a minute. There's something I want to talk about with evidence. So it's my understanding that, and this is subject to analysis, that they got potential eye shine. I saw a couple of videos that they may well have had an encounter there, or a couple of potential Bigfoots drop down behind it, and there's images there. So, and everyone came back extremely positive and very excited about what they found. And I think that that's a good starting point. So I think in terms of the conference and the expedition stroke investigation afterwards, that it was a really good success. I understand from David, because we spoke about it just before I left, that he's going to write a field report. And, I think that's a really good way to go. I think that the best way to produce evidence that you want to be tangible and you want to be scrutinized is not, forgive me, on Facebook. It's really about writing coherent field reports. This is what we observed. This is the structure. These, and moving forward that way. And David and I talked about that. So I think that's very encouraging. That's what I'd like to see. So there's a couple of things. I'll come on to the last event, which is really strange, which I know you're waiting for. But the other thing I'd like to say, because I was thinking about this today. Now, I used to work, let's just say I used to work in law in connection with the British government. We don't need to go into detail. But what people have to understand is the standard of evidence is very high for these things. Very, 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 very high if you want to get scientific evidence. Now, let me give you a specific example from my past and then link it into Bigfoot. So I was looking for something called the Orang-Pendek in Sumatra. And it's a bipedal creature, for those of you who don't know, who lives in the jungle there. And I had, together with my team, not just me, but together with my team, we had some very good substantive evidence for it. So let me explain this. So we had prints, which were analysed by Jeff Meldrum, but also Dr. David Chivers, who was the leading primatologist in the world from Cambridge, who came to the conclusion it was from an unknown primate. I had hair samples, which were analysed by Hans Brunner, and he'd been used previously on the Linda Chamberlain, the Dingo Baby case, the film with Meryl Streep. And he he had proved that a dingo did in fact kill the baby. Yeah, the police had arrested her for murder, so he was used by the Australian police to solve a murder. Yeah, and he analysed all the hairs. He brought loads of hairs in from all zoos, and he came to the conclusion it was an unknown species. And you could clearly see from the photographs. Anybody who's interested, you can see it it's entitled Edge Science Magazine, A New Primate Species in Sumatra. You can just Google it, so you can see the paper that we wrote. But we submitted it to Nature, and off the record, somebody there said, well, Adam, if this was a new species of frog, we'd have no problem. But the thing about it is, it's extraordinary claims that require extraordinary proof. And I know that's an old mantra and people get frustrated with it, but it's a very important point. If we're, I'm looking for evidence of a creature which can be independently scientifically corroborated. I accept that not everybody's looking for that. You might be just looking for an experience. You might be looking for excitement. Whatever you're into, then that's totally cool. I'm not saying that because that's what I want, then it must be the approach you must follow. If you just want to go out and see one, then that's cool. But the reason I think, the evidential standard is so high for this, and has to be, is because it would literally be almost earth-shattering news were we to get that corroborative evidence, were we to get that high scientific standard. It would change people's perceptions of their very nature. So we have to be cautious. So I do understand it, although it was personally frustrating with the Orang-Pendek. I do understand it. And it's the same for Bigfoot. You have to have that high standard. And so, it has to be really something very substantive in order to get that scientific shift, get that scrutiny. There are people who in the scientific community who will look at things. They're not all hostile. I work with some of them, but it has to be super, super high quality, much higher than for many of the regular species. And I almost say, that you have to be, there's terminology called cognitive priming, in the sense that I almost, often almost the worst time to find evidence of a Bigfoot is when you're on a Bigfoot expedition. Do you know what I mean? Because everybody wants to find it. and it's called cognitive priming. You want evidence, you're excited, so therefore if some. And I won't name the person, but I was in Oregon one time with a very nice lady who I really like, and we were sat around the campfire, and she was like, "There's eye shine, there's eye shine, there's eye shine," and I said, "There's not eye shine, that's the moon." And she said, "No, there's eye shine, there is," and I said, "No, it's the moon." And I physically had to take her in a nice way over to away from the trees so she could see the moon. Now, and she was like, "Okay." Now, why do I say all of this? I think that, as you rightly said, Josh, it's an area you've got to go back to, and you've got to keep improving the quality of the evidence. Yeah, the evidence was cool. I mean, I've seen some of those videos, but and I enjoyed it. Yeah, there's some great evidence there, and there's some howls that Robert got, which are very interesting. But all of that stuff needs analysis. But for me, obviously, it's not scientifically determinative. It's one step in the process. Is it a good area to research? Absolutely. It's great, and it's great you found it. It's exciting. And if you're just in for an experience and you just think, well, I'd just like to see what happens and have a roll and have an adventure, I don't care about the sciencey stuff, then that's cool too, because you can just do that without any sort of other things to consider. But for me, that's always what I'm about. I'm always interested in, well, can this thing be repeated? Can this experiment be corroborated? Can this be analyzed? Because I'm interested in getting, for me, what drives me is answers to questions, intellectual questions about the nature of what these creatures are. And for me, the best way to go about that is a scientific approach. It doesn't negate anybody else's approach. I'm not trying to evangelize it. I'm just saying what I do.
All right.
So that's the Bigfoot stuff. Do you have any questions about that, guys?
No. That makes a lot of sense. I think that, as you said, the evidence to that nowadays, there's so, photos, for example, it seems like I've seen photos. I've had people show me photos that look very legit. However, it sounds like a lot of people don't want to share those photos because there's so much scrutiny involved in trying to discredit them. Have you run into a lot of that, where people will show you photos that you think are legit, but they won't publicize them for that reason?
No. I've had people who have shown me photos of bushes with red circles around them, saying there's a Bigfoot in here. Yeah, gotcha. And you know what? There's often a baby with it. I'm saying there's like a Bigfoot, and there's always a young one, and there's loads of circles. I haven't had that. I mean, if you have, that's great. But it depends what those people want. First of all, I can say, look, if people send me stuff in confidence, then it stays in confidence. Yeah. It's as simple as that. So if somebody sent me a genuine photograph, I would say to them, well, I give my opinion, honestly, and then I'd say, well, what do you want me to do with it? And why have you sent it to me? Some people just want to share photos internally, but if they're putting it up on something like Facebook, then they must know they're going to get hammered at some point. If you put a photograph up on Facebook of anything that's connected with it, you're just going to get bang, bang, bang. That's the way it is. Yeah. So what do you want out of it? I'm not a photographic expert, and I think it's important that people say what they are and are not. Yeah, I'm an explorer, and any evidence I find is handed over to credible scientists. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert. I'm not a photographic expert. So I hand it over. If they said to me, well, I want you to hand it over, then I would. I'd try and find somebody who would look at it. If they said to me, I just want you to look at it, then that's cool too, and there it pops. But I'm yet to see anything recently, in my recent memory, Todd, that I can think of and say, well, you know what, I think that might be a Bigfoot. And although I'm not a photographic expert in any way, I have seen great apes in the wild. I've seen gorillas. I've seen orang. I've seen these creatures in the natural habitat. I'm blessed to do that, but with my varied experiences with great apes. There won't be many people who've done that. So I would imagine I would be a fairly obvious choice, certainly for something like a gorilla or something that might look like an orang. I've seen them move. I know the locomotion. Other people have seen them in the zoo. 99.999% of the population have. But nobody's sent me anything compelling. Not yet. I hope so. It would be wonderful. It would be wonderful. So I'm on the side of it. I just haven't. Yeah.
Well, in your opinion, I know we get a lot of footprint evidence. I know there's groups out there that are really focused on gathering DNA evidence. What is it going to, in your opinion, what will it take? What's it going to take to get the scientific community to take this more serious?
Well, I think there's a difference. It's a good question. It's one I've debated about, and it's a difference. So it depends on the creature. So let me give you. Let's cut back because I'm doing comparisons between the Orang-Pendek and the Bigfoot. Yeah. So let's look at that. Okay. So with the Orang-Pendek in the jungle, I've got a very good friend, Jeremy Holden, who's a great wildlife photographer, brilliant guy, and underappreciated. Now we discussed this with something like the Orang-Pendek. Because it's in the jungle in a remoter area, a really good quality photograph. I mean, much better than the Patterson Gimlin. I'm talking about a photograph with the same resolution as we've got. Would be enough to move the scientific community forward. I'm sure of that because we've looked into it. But with the Bigfoot, the problem is that the standard of proof would have to be even higher. In the sense that there's so much fakery and trickery and stuff like that, it has to be really good. And I don't think realistically a photograph would be wonderfully interesting, and I'd love it. But it's not going to cause the scientific community to come out and say, "Well, that's big. There we go. We know Bigfoot exists." Yeah. Foot tracks are wonderful and again interesting, but they haven't persuaded the scientific community. And they're not going to, not on their own. What really you need is DNA. But the technology for DNA is encouraging. And I'll give you 3 examples of how it's moved forward and moved forward really rapidly. So I did a film years ago called The Last Living Neanderthal, which is on National Geographic. At the end of it, Dr. Todd Dissertel, at the end of it, he's a nice guy, I respect him, but he was going with the current scientific evidence at the time, which is absolutely, he was bang on. And he said, we talk about whether about the existence of us and Neanderthals. And he said, did humans, modern humans and Neanderthals, I'm paraphrasing him, have sex? Well, of course, that's the way it is. Did they have offspring? Well, probably not. Very unlikely. Now we know that that's not the case. Now science has improved, and up to 4% of DNA in some people is Neanderthal. So we know that that's not the case. Second one, I was very close to an Orang-Pendek. In fact, we had it chewing on the rattan. We know because one of the guys saw it, the guide, and he was around there. But when it was chewing, we got the strands and placed them in, because it had saliva, and we placed them. We got the samples and sent it off to Todd. Now at the time he just wasn't able to extract the DNA from the saliva. Yeah. Now he would have been now, and we know about the Orang-Pendek. Yeah. But today, I read only today. Obviously, we talked about this environmental DNA. You can pull stuff from lakes. I'm sure you're both familiar with that. But today, I heard that you're going to be able to pull DNA from air. Yeah, from air around creatures. There's an article around that. So the science is improving all the time. That really good science is improving all the time, and so sometimes people can be discouraged by the fact that saying, we're never going to get the proof, or it has to be habeas corpus, it has to show me the body in order for it. I don't think that's the case. I think if we started to see comparative patterns in DNA in different areas by whatever technology we have, that would be enough. So there's your answer. Well, it's a long answer, but there's your answer.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Now, I don't know much about DNA. I've read up some stuff, but I understand there's different types of tests, right? You have mitochondrial, right, tests. You have what they call nuclear DNA. And am I correct in that specific tests, there's certain tests that find more data than others, and there's some that's way more expensive than, say, a basic test? And what is the difference? What needs to happen? Is it a financial in these studies or in these expeditions where DNA is supposedly, found, and then the DNA is sent in to get tested? Is there an issue with the type of DNA testing that's happened? Does there need to be other type of DNA tests that are just too expensive to do?
Well,
or how does that? Okay.
Well, let me break it down. Let me start by saying, okay, I'm not a DNA expert. I'm not a scientist, but I do the field research. So there are basic tests you can do. They're only a couple of $100. They wouldn't necessarily lead you to anything, but they might be interesting for you. What you would have to have is rigorous testing, and you would have to have it over different samples. You would have to have it done by at least a couple of scientists who could corroborate the results of the first scientist. This is in a nutshell. You'd have to have it peer-reviewed in a paper. It doesn't go on Facebook. You don't say, yeah, we've got a Bigfoot and a Bigfoot hair. Yeah, you don't do that. This is the correct methodology. And yes, it's expensive. It costs thousands if you want to do that sort of thing. And you have to have that very careful process. It's not easy. Even the eDNA stuff, it's a lot of money. If your group found something that was really substantive, it couldn't just be something that you saw on a fence and was a hair and you didn't recognize it. Even if you do, a very simple thing people can do if they're not sure about hair is just get a field microscope, and even a small cheapo one you can look through and you can see, if I pulled a hair off my head, it would look, you could see that it was a human hair and we compared it with a deer hair. You could easily see that. Anyone could see that, So then if you get something that you think is very interesting, that's the process. And you send the slides in and, you can persuade members of the scientific community. Maybe. I can't guarantee it. I can't speak for them. But what you don't do, and what's happened too often, is someone sent a bag of hair or a bag of moss off to somebody and said, this is Bigfoot, analyze it. You're like, okay. That's happened a few times to people, and they've been like, well, you know what, buddy, why should I? and then someone gets uppity because they've not got the results that they want. Okay, so most of the time, I'm afraid it's going to be a horse, a dog, or a cat, or it's going to be one of those, and you can't get all crappy if you don't get the result you want. Right. And they're not going to lie to you. They're not going to lie to you. I don't believe that they're going to lie to you in any way. So if it's a reputable person. So all I'd say though, on a positive note, is that again, with this new technology coming in and all the things coming in around that, it's going to make life hopefully a bit easier. So answers. People might not always like the answers to the questions that they want. They might not like it, and almost some of this can take on a sort of almost quasi-theological way. When people say, "Well, Bigfoot's pure of heart" and all of this lot, there's all this attitude that you mustn't do this. But for me, science is the way forward. For me,
yeah.
In your opinion, so you've studied the Yeti. You've been to Nepal, right? You've done expeditions looking for the Yeti, the Orang-Pendek. Do you feel like we're looking at many different species, or do you feel like there's a relationship?
Different species. There might well be a relationship. And Jeff Meldrum, when we were in China, I could give you a long answer, but Jeff Meldrum
Yeah.
in China saw correlations between the Yeren, the Chinese one, and Bigfoot in America, and he wrote a paper with Dr. Zhu from the University of Beijing, like a joint collaboration paper, which was really interesting and very good science.
Yeah.
The Orang-Pendek is small and bipedal. For example, we know what Bigfoot is, but the what people don't understand sometimes, and it does surprise me sometimes about what is taught in schools, because they don't understand that for most of our recorded history, there wasn't just these type of creatures potentially running around, but also many different types of humans, many different types. Yeah, we're just one type. We're the most successful that's won the evolutionary and biological race, if you like. That's why we're the top of the tree. We're a very aggressive species, and right now we're in charge. There were many different types of humans, and we know more about them in the last 20 years, I think, than we ever knew. Denisovans, deer people, Neanderthal. I'm not going to but you know yourselves. But people are still surprised by this notion. People just think, well, there was us, the Neanderthals maybe, and then there's a few gorillas and chimps running around and blah. But that they have a completely wrong notion of our evolutionary history. Mm-hmm. And when you explain to them, well, look, about what I've just said, I think people are more receptive to the idea. Again, not because I want to evangelize. I'm not trying to convince people of my point of view. I'm not standing for the Bigfoot party or anything, or the Orang-Pendek case. I'm just stating what is known scientific fact. There's nothing controversial about that. So yeah, I'm generally encouraged, but it's not easy always.
Yeah. Do you find some of the other countries that you've dealt with, are they more involved, than the United States is, the government, or do you find certain countries where you're doing expeditions where there's more involvement from, say, the scientific community, or more involvement maybe even from the government that's involved in doing research, or do you find kind of the same type of behavior around the different countries as far as how they manage that, I guess?
Well, I think it depends on the country. There's different openness in different countries.
Okay.
I've not found any inherent hostility when I've been doing investigations. Nobody said, well, we're not going to let you do this. They've been kind of curious. I mean, even in very remote places, they're kind of curious. And some officials are more open than others. I was speaking to a guy in India once, and he said to me, and I was looking for the Mandi Barung, and it's a big area of the Garo foothills. And I was going into this jungle area, and he said, I said, can you tell me a bit about it? I was leading the team, so I was negotiating all the paperwork, and there was a lot of paperwork. And he was like, well, I have no real idea what's going on in 80% of this place. It's hundreds of miles, no idea. 80% of it, no idea. Hundreds of miles. Nepal, 70% of it's not occupied. There's hundreds of miles of area. People need to understand there are still very remote places. That jungle in the Congo, a few pygmies knocking around, a few Bantus here and there, area the size of Switzerland. Now there are people who might traverse it occasionally, but there are still plenty of places which are still remote, and we still don't know what's in them. And that's certainly true.
Right. Well, out of all your experiences and being out in the field, what would you would you say all the behaviors amongst the different, are there a lot of similar behaviors, or do you see a lot of differences in types of behavior between the different creatures?
What I'd say is I'm looking for evidence of sophistication.
Okay.
And I haven't seen a lot of evidence of huge sophistication. I've seen a lot of evidence of behavior where they roam. Some of them may, it's all speculation, of course, but a lot of them seem to roam vast distances. And that's the consistency I've seen. I've not seen any evidence of anything like more complicated tool use than say.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Say, you know, the Orang-Pendek, I was looking for evidence. Does it have any evidence of, is its tool use commensurate or greater than, say, a chimpanzee's in any way? And I didn't see any evidence of that. Fire use would be a big beacon to extinction. You know, if they were to light fires, and I'll give you an example. When I was in Mongolia, there was one occasion where there was me, Biamba, Bilgi, my translator, and Jagger, my driver. There were three of us. And I was using my GPS to navigate us back to Ulaanbaatar across. But Mongolia is the size of Western Europe. And I worked out that we were probably at least 50 miles from another person. And we were just sat there around a little campfire, chugging a couple of vodkas at the end of the night, as you do in Mongolia. It's the thing, you know. And if we had seen a fire, because it would be so unusual, I can guarantee that the next day we would have gone and investigated it, because we were like, what's that person doing? And the same with hunters, you know. If us three were out hunting and we'd seen a fire up in the woods, we would end up tracking that creature and they would be extinct. Yeah. So sometimes you can have cultural recession, but they're not, to me, there's no imparted wisdom or great tool use or anything else like that I've seen. I don't know what they are. I'm not going to say, well, you know what, I think they're this, because I don't know. But all I can tell you is what I've found and my observations from what I've found.
I know you had the opportunity to go to Port Chatham in Alaska. Is that correct?
Yes. I made a film there. Well, I've been twice, once on the initial investigation and then once with the Travel Channel. Okay.
What were your findings with that? I was always kind of curious because I've heard a lot of stories where there's a lot of aggression, and I'm kind of wondering why there's so much aggression in that one area.
Well, let's start with aggression as a subject, because people will say, sometimes people have said to me, well, there's no way a Bigfoot can be aggressive. We'll say, well, how can you make that extrapolation based on any evidence of any animal species? So, for example, let's look at us. Some people might say, you know, there are nice people, not so nice people, aggressive people, kind people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look at your dog. Nice dogs, bitey dogs, you know, lazy dogs. Yeah. Yeah. Why wouldn't that be the case in a Bigfoot? And, you know, we know, for example, with tribal history, some tribes are far more aggressive or were far more aggressive than others. You know, if we were in the Aztec culture right now, it'd be hard for us. You know what I mean? Failure is not an option.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you know, you have all of these situations. Now, I like to do things that are a bit different and edgy. And when Steve Major said to me, let's do this, I was very interested in it because because the story basically is that in the 1950s, this town was abandoned because something that they call the hairy man started to kill people. And I thought that was I thought it sounded like something that Stephen King might write, but you know, you look at it and those were the things. And I ended up writing a novel after it, you know, because I thought it was such a cool story. And so I went the first time with Stephen and Josiah, and it was just an exploration, you know, to go there. But it was even difficult getting somebody to take us, you know, like in the boat, because the locals were like, you're going to die. And it was like one like half-assed crazy guy. It was like Jaws, the captain. He was like laughing, I'll take you. We'll be going around the Clashing Rocks and the Mermaid's Cove, you know, all that sort of thing. It was like a cliche. It was wonderful. So we did it the first time. I'm going to give you a short answer because I want to tell you about this other story. I want to make sure I've got time to tell you about what happened in Michigan. So I'm going to talk about that. So we'll do that next if that's all right. Because I don't want to get off this show and not tell you. I owe it to you. And then I filmed something which looked like, I mean, there was one occasion when this thing came rushing down. I was using the night vision and this thing came rushing down the hillside away from our camp. And I even said to Stephen and Josiah at the time, I said, get ready. This is going to kick off. And we met Larry Beans Baxter afterwards. He was not on that one. He was on the second one. But it rushed down the slope and then it stopped. Now, I didn't know it. I mean, they used the footage on the Travel Channel. I didn't know it at the time, but Dr. Robert Alley had analysed it, and for the show, he said, well, it's not persuasive, but it looks bipedal. It looks like it's got some sort of locomotion. Again, it's not gonna win any like film awards, but it was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah.
But there's a shorter answer to that.
Okay.
So let's come on to the other thing.
Sure.
So last night, we decided we'd go back because, not least because Gwen had some sort of communication with the Gwendolyn had some sort of communication with the spirit thing or the ghost or whatever, and she didn't want to leave it. And so we came back and with Michelle and Ernie, and we went back to that place, and we thought we'll do it at the end of the night, but it's already getting late. I mean, it's gone like 1 a.m, and the old gentleman as the caretaker was sleeping downstairs in the cabin. Everybody else was away in the location which we talked about earlier on, and in the attic there are a few beds, and Gwendolyn's there and I'm there in the attic, and that's what we're doing. So we're right at the end of the night. So we try this Gansfield experiment again, and I put on the headphones. Same thing that happened. I got this girl, and some of this is speculation. And I got this girl, and I was saying out in synopsis. They told me afterwards, I was talking about this girl, and she was 9 years old. I think I said she was wearing a blue dress, and that she died of cancer or something like that. And they looked into it, and apparently she had. That's what I understand. But I also got this military voice, this military style man, for want of a better word, coming through, and that was it. And Michelle and Ernie tried it. Michelle talked about margaritas a lot. It didn't work for her. We were just having a bit of a laugh, you know what I mean? Because each time she go margarita, and we were having a laugh. It was a good laugh, bit of fun. They went off to their tent, and this is what happened. So I go to bed, and I'm lying in my bed, and there's really sharp stairs. If you know, like the stairs are very steep because you're in the cabin, they're very, very steep, and it goes, and then they go to the pitch black when you turn off all the lights. That's where the cabin is. And I'm lying in my bed. I've been in, and I'm like just drifting off to sleep. And then I can't even do this properly. But this voice comes out. Now, again, I made the point about cognitive priming earlier. Obviously, I've just been looking for ghost stuff. So I'm caveating it with that. But this was the weirdest frigging thing. This voice comes out and it goes, "Help me! Help me!" I can't even emulate it. And I sat up and I was like, what the is that? Wow. What the is that? And it was carrying on. And it was like, it was like no other voice of anything I'd ever heard. Yeah. Now you could say, and it's important to know this, could it have been Ernie and Michelle coming in? Well, no. Afterwards you'd investigated. It wasn't them, but it would have been or somebody else. Well, the others were all at the quarry. You can't discount that somebody could sneak in and do something and set up a load of technical equipment. I would have heard them because the voice did not sound like a human. It didn't. That was my best effort. It sounded weird and kind of spectral. It was shocking.
Oh, interesting.
And it carried on. It was loud. It wasn't whispering. It was like shouting, "Help me," like that, carrying on and on and on. And I went over to where Gwen was, and I woke her up and I said, "Can you hear that? I need some corroboration." And she's like, "Yeah, I can hear it." And then she just went boom, back down on her bed, and I could not wake her. So this thing, and it went away, and I thought it's gone away. And then came back a few minutes later again, like that, shouting. Yeah. And I was like, dude, I thought I'm gonna have to address this thing. Where is this going?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where is this going? It's not going away. I'm gonna have to have some sort of interaction with it.
Yeah.
So I said to it, you know, I'm not going down there now in the dark. You know, it's just not happening. What I'll do is I'll sort this out tomorrow. We'll sort it out tomorrow. Yeah. You like rasp away, off you go in a nice way. You know, like leave me be. I must say, gentlemen, it did not make for a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
I can't say after that. I was like, listen, because I was thinking, is it going to come up the stairs? If it is, I'll just grab my phone, you know, and record it. But I'm not going down. I did not get a good vibe about going down and confronting it. I just didn't think that was wise on my own. But I thought if it comes up the stairs, I'll tackle it in whatever way I have to. You know, whatever it is, I'll obviously have to have a go at it. But I'm not going down there where I'm at a disadvantage if it comes to that. I'm just not.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do that with a wild animal. Why would I do that with something
Right.
I don't understand? It's not a good idea. So what did I do after that? Well, I woke up the next morning and obviously I discussed it with Gwen and I prayed for that. If it is a person, I prayed for him and I said, you know, go into the light, and if that will help you, then I hope so. No, you know, and it was remarkable. I mean, it was shocking. Yeah. I remember I phoned Ernie the next day and I said, you'll never believe what happened. There was some really, I was like telling him because it was so weird. It was such a strange experience. And I am not making any assertions about what it was. I know there's cognitive priming. I know that there is an opportunity for fraud, but I wouldn't think it of any of the team in Michigan. They were lovely people. But, you know, being objective, people would say that. But, you know, all I can do is tell you what happened, and that's what happened, and say that it did not sound at all like a human voice. It was, I've never heard anything like that. And it's one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me. It was so strange, so weird. I can't tell you.
And it was real loud, huh?
Very loud. And it went on. It wasn't like if it had just been like 2 or 3 times, Todd, I would have said, well, okay. But it went away and then it came back. It wasn't satisfied. It was like, you're going to like deal with me. You're going to deal with me.
So this would have been down in the kitchen area?
Yeah, near the bathroom. Near the bathroom, but you know, there wasn't anything you could visibly see. I mean, that was why I didn't want to go down there just in case, because I couldn't see, and I have to put where that angle of, you know, again, like because when I'm tracking wild animals in the wild, it's the same principle. If there had been a tiger in that area, I wouldn't go down there. My legs would be exposed before I could get down. Do you know what I mean? And that was what I was conscious of. So I was conscious of if it was something that could assault me, it would be able to grab my ankles before I could get down and defend myself. So it wasn't a good idea to go down at that time. It was a good idea to but to wait until the next day. I'd love to repeat the experiment. You know, I mean, as a scientific experiment, it would fail. There's no parameters. There's a possibility for corruption. It hasn't been corroborated. Yeah. So you'd have to repeat it. But as a story, it's A1, you know, for me personally. I love it. I love it. It's a great story. I'd love to do it again because it's so interesting. Nothing like that has ever happened to me. Nothing.
That's crazy. Yeah, that would have been fascinating. I didn't even know the history of the house until you told the story today. I didn't realize that history, but I did meet, I forget his name, the guy that older guy he was there at the house.
Yeah. He was there at the house. He was like a caretakery guy.
Oh, I'd love to hear his.
I think so. But David's very careful about us not revealing names and sources. So because he wants to preserve the anonymity of the guy who owns it. So I won't say any more about that. I mean, it's not because there's anything, just for people who maybe watch, it's not because there's anything like nefarious about it. It's just they don't want a lot of attention about it. So
right.
But it was weird. It was in completely, and not what I expected. You know what I mean? So
right. I don't know what I would have done, man. I think I'd have.
Well, there's nothing you could really do unless it came up there, and you had to like fight it or whatever. I mean, whatever it was, it's so weird. But it you know, I wasn't sorry it didn't come up the stairs that time. I wish I'd got a video of it, but I wasn't going to go downstairs and tackle it in the dark. Not grab me with it, trying to grab my bloody legs as I went down the stairs. Not having that. But I mean, hopefully, I did some good for it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I certainly prayed, and hopefully that'll have brought it. If it is a spirit, then that'll have brought it some release. I hope. All I can say is there's the story, and I tried to do some good at the end of it, and I hope I did. And then that's kind of as much as I can say about it, really.
Well, do you have any other, out of all the expeditions you've done, what's probably the most exciting experience that you can remember out of some of the other expeditions?
I'll tell you one because it's a good story and it's about how science works. So there was one. I mean, I've had a few exciting experiences over the years, thank goodness. But I mean, it's important to state that a lot of the time when you're doing research, nothing much happens. You know, it's almost like, you know, when you're an archaeologist, most of the time they're digging in dirt, and every now and again they might find a coin, but they've been digging in dirt for many weeks before they find that. Same principle with field research. I don't want to say it's all excitement. Most of the time you find nothing. But here's one. Where something is happening, because I know I've not got much time, so I'll just tell you the story. So I was in Norway. I was looking for their equivalent of the Seljord. I was looking for their equivalent of the Loch Ness monster, and it's called the Seljord Serpent. So what I did there, in synopsis, was, and there were, you know, the stories go back hundreds of years. It's not like 50 years, but with the British part of the team, because there was a Swedish part and a British part. We got limnologist reports, which were fish experts, showing the concentration of fish. I sent the British team in different directions on boats, on small boats rather than big boats, which plough up the water. And I just told them to sit there and look for evidence. Get used to looking at wakes, get used to looking at the differentials, all of that. And we concentrated on the areas where there have been most eyewitnesses report. And I actually saw the Seljord Serpent, and I'll tell you why I can make that as a reasonable assertion in a minute. I saw it move through the water. I saw the barbs on its back, which were like the 17th century woodcut. I was there with another guy, and we tried to chase it, but we saw it. Now, why can I make that assertion? Why can I say, well, I feel like I saw the Seljord Serpent, rather than, and people could say, well, it's just a wake, or it's I don't know, an animal that we know about. Because we used the hydrophone in the water. We dropped that hydrophone in the water, and the hydrophone emissions, and that's the sound. And that was analysed by Dr. Old von Soldal at the Marine Institute in Bergen, who's one of the leading experts in the world on this. And her conclusion was, and her panel of experts, was, I'm astonished to say that it's an unknown species. So if that had been the Loch Ness monster, it would have been world news. But, you know, monsters are fashionable, you know. No one necessarily wants to look for a giant earwig. Everybody wants to look for Bigfoot or the Yeti. This isn't a particularly fashionable one, so it didn't make world news. But for me, it was super exciting. So
absolutely. That sounds fascinating.
So that's the main one. But I could tell you more, guys, but we're nearly out of time.
We're gonna have. We'll definitely. I hope you'll come on with us again, because we could go on forever, I think.
No, of course. I just have one quick question, if I may, Josh. How's your leg doing?
It's doing a lot better.
Good.
I mean, it is still a little sore every so often, but it's healing.
Good.
I know tendon damage takes a little bit to heal.
Well, you showed a lot of determination, I have to say to you, even though, you know, you were sore and you were bruised, you were still going to get there. You were still walking. You were still like, I'm determined. I'm going to make it. Like you and Blake would be like going behind, and you'd be like, I'm going to get there. And I'd see you get there. I saw how much effort it was for you, but you still got there. So kudos to you, man. That's just the last thing I wanted to say.
Well, thank you. And thank you for coming on and taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, guys. Well, you're good people. I hope I get an opportunity to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. You as well.
And I'll stay in touch.
Okay, good stuff. All right. See you guys. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Adam. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You have a good night.
You too.